Hey guys, welcome to the Craft Angles YouTube channel. Nandini here with some more inspiration for your Diwali cards. My focus today is the gorgeous ornamental lace stencil, and I'm going to combine this with some of the texture pastes that Craft Angles has. Let's get started. I'll be using the Celebrating Diwali stamp set for the sentiment and the ornamental lace stencil. I'll also be using some texture pastes. I'll be creating a background using the liquid watercolors. I'm using my silicone mat to protect my work surface, and I have a piece of watercolor paper which I've trimmed large enough so that I can get 3 A2 sized card fronts out of it. I also have a bunch of liquid watercolors that I'm going to be using. I will start by wetting my paper thoroughly with plain simple water, and I'm using a large flat brush to do this. Once my paper is thoroughly wet, I'm going to take the Lemon Tart liquid watercolor. This is a lovely bright yellow color, and I'm just going to randomly splash some color on my watercolor paper. You can use a spray bottle now to move the color around. Unfortunately, I couldn't find mine, so I'm going to be using my large flat brush instead. I'll just wet my brush and start spreading the color around on the paper. Just make sure you don't put too much water while doing this, because otherwise the color will get too dilute. After I finish with Lemon Tart, I will use the Pretty Peony and then Soulmate. Pretty Peony is a lovely pink, while Soulmate is a darker red color. The idea is to layer these colors so that we get a nice vibrant background. I'll also bring in some drops of Poolside. This is a nice blue, and I'll use the flat brush to dilute and spread the color. I was not too happy with the way the Poolside looked on this background, so I used very little and diluted it so that it did not show up too much. This is one of the best things about these kind of backgrounds, because you can keep adjusting them till you are happy with the end result. Once I'm done, I will go back and add Pretty Peony, Soulmate and Lemon Tart till I'm absolutely happy with the way the background looks. Just remember that whatever background you create with watercolors is going to dry lighter, so you need to adjust the intensity of the colors accordingly. Once the watercolor paper is completely dry, I'm going to take a brush and sprinkle some droplets of water for a more distressed look. I'll also use a clean tissue paper to dab the water away. Let's start with the actual stenciling now. To do this, I'm going to first take some washi tape and attach the stencil firmly to my work surface. This is to ensure that the stencil doesn't move once I start applying the texture paste. I also want to mask off the area outside the stencil, and for this I simply trace the stencil with a pen on a piece of masking paper and fussy cut the out. I just firmly attach the mask to my paper so that the texture paste that I apply remains within the area of the mask. I'll start with the white texture paste. I'm going to take a little bit in a metal palette knife, and I'm going to gently spread it over the stencil. Remember to keep a very even pressure and not press too hard, otherwise your texture paste will go under the stencil and you will not get a nice crisp finish. Also, always remember to wash your stencil and your palette knife immediately, and keep the lid of your texture paste firmly closed. I'll now gently pull the stencil away. I'll also peel the mask away carefully. Remember to be careful at this step, because the texture paste is still wet and there is definitely a danger of sparing it. I'll allow this panel to air dry now before converting it into a card. I'm going to create the next panel in exactly the same manner. Only thing is, I'm not masking any part of it. I'm going to be using the Unicorn Dreams texture paste, and this is a beautiful translucent texture paste with shimmery sequins in it, and I want to cover my entire panel with this paste. So I'll follow the same steps, attach my stencil firmly to the work surface with a washi tape, and then I'll gently apply the paste through my stencil using a metal palette knife. Just be a little more cautious while using this particular texture paste, since it's more chunky than the white one which we used previously, and you need to make sure that you apply the correct amount of pressure so that the paste does not get below the stencil. I also decided to tint my texture paste, so I just added a small drop of evergreen liquid watercolor and mixed it with the texture paste. This just added a little more contrast against the orangey red background and made the texture paste stand out even further. Once my stenciling is done, I'm going to allow it to air dry completely to get a beautiful, shimmery, very festive looking panel. For the final panel, I'm again going to use the same technique, only this time I'm going to be using the clear texture paste. This texture paste is milky in appearance when you open the bottle, but once it dries completely clear. In fact, it almost looks like you have run the panel through an embossing folder. I also decided to add the mask to the stencil because I did not want to get any texture paste on rest of the panel. Now once I remove the mask and the stencil, you'll see the beautiful stenciling that we've got with the clear. I'll allow this to air dry completely and then come back. Let's see our 3 panels which have completely dried now. This is the first one which I did with the white texture paste. This is the second one for which we use the Unicorn Dreams texture paste. You can see the beautiful shimmer on this card. And this is the final one which we did with the clear texture paste. This looks almost like it's been embossed. Let's put away our white and Unicorn Dreams panels. I'm going to elevate the panel with the clear texture paste by using the Joseph's coat technique on it. I'll start with some dyeings. I'm using red, brown and black, and I'm using the Craft Angles ink blending brush to apply the ink to the panel. As I start applying the darker ink, you can see that the area which is covered by the texture paste seems to almost pop up. This is because once the texture paste has dried, it becomes waterproof and acts as a resist. So I will just keep adding the red and the brown till I get a nice dark color. I'll also add some black towards the edges. Once my panel is done, my inking is done, I'm going to take a dry cloth and just wipe it down so that whatever residual ink is present on top of the resist will be wiped away. Let's start assembling our cards now. I've stamped the sentiment from the Celebrating Diwali stamp set 3 times and embossed it with black embossing powder, and I'm going to be using the copper reactive foils to add some more shimmer to my card. I have my carrier sheet ready. I'm just going to place my stamped and heat embossed panel and cover it with a small piece of the reactive foil. I'll just go offline and run this through the laminator, and I've finished laminating my sentiment panel, and once I peel it out, you can see a beautiful copper colored sentiment. The heat reactive foil tends to stick to embossing powder. As it goes through the laminator, the embossing powder melts and holds the foil. To finally assemble the card, I have a orange card base and a black mat which I've cut slightly smaller. The size of my card base is 5.5 inches by 4 1/4 inch, and I've cut the mat 1/4 inch smaller all around. I'll just stick it down with some liquid glue, and now I'll stick down the watercolored panel on it. Since this is watercolor paper, please make sure that you apply a lot of glue, otherwise it will not stick properly. I'll just center the panel over my card base and I'll leave this to dry. I created my other 2 cards in exactly the same manner. I also have the sentiment panels trimmed and ready to go. I've just adhered a little bit of foam behind each one to give it some extra dimension. And now I'm going to use liquid glue to simply stick them down on the panel. Just remember to use a strong liquid adhesive because in my experience foam doesn't stick very easily to any kind of textured background. I found it easiest to apply the liquid glue, place my sentiment and then just place something heavy on top for a few minutes till the glue starts drying and forming a bond. This is especially true if you're trying to do it on the panel made with the Unicorn Dreams texture paste because it is a very textured, very gritty kind of paste. So you need to make sure that you apply plenty. Once I finish putting on the sentiments, my cards are ready. I hope you enjoyed these cards and these techniques and will give them a try. I had a lot of fun playing with these texture pastes and I'm definitely going to try more ideas with them. Do you have any ideas on how you can use texture pastes in your work? Please let me know in the comments below. Bye.